And we did very well in 2016, and we did much better.
All right, we're going to continue to monitor this news conference. Trump at his golf club in New Jersey, in Bedminster, New Jersey. Lots to discuss.
Virtually 100% of the net job creation in the last year has gone to migrants. You know that? Most of the job creation has gone to migrants. In fact, I've heard that substantially more than beyond the number of 100%. It's a much higher number than that. But
what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Migrant crime, and I think it's going to end up being the worst category of all.
And Steve, what does the data show?
Well, you know, it was supposed to be an economic speech, but he can't help himself, and he has to get off into things like migrants and immigration and the border and crime and all that kind of stuff. But once again, the facts are not quite what he said. First, let's just talk about crime in general. He likes to think the country's in the middle of some crime wave. That is actually not true. Violent crime per 100,000 people has dropped 26% under Joe Biden. What is even more amazing is that it, in fact, ended Trump's administration slightly higher than when it began.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
Did people really think that because the subject of his speech was supposed to be the economy, that Captain Bonespurs, the narrator of Sharknado Part 2, Watch Out for the Electric Battery, was going to stay on topic?
Kamala, you're fired! Get out of here! Go! Get out of here!
Come on, a Trump speech isn't complete without the late great Hannibal Lecter reference. And FYI, this is undoubtedly because he thinks that seeking asylum means people are coming from insane asylums.
I saw a comment online and I have to share it with you guys. I think it cracks the code as to why, for the past several months, every single time Donald Trump is in front of a group or in front of an audience and he's riffing and he brings up immigration, he references Hannibal Lecter. Is it possible the former guy straight up doesn't know that asylum has two meanings? It could explain why he thinks political prisoners claiming asylum from Venezuela are being emptied out of insane asylums.
People from insane asylums, and it drives them crazy. Hannibal Lecter.
Anyway, as you probably know, Trump was campaigning this week to roll out his latest campaign slogan, "Make Biden my opponent again."
Ideas, and Joe Biden too. I mentioned him, but he's sort of gonzo. It all started with the debate. I should have been a little bit easy. Somebody said, your debate performance was horrible. I said, why? Because you forced him out of government. But I believe she'll be just as bad. I believe she's maybe in many ways going to be worse because he wasn't really a radical left. But she is. She's real. He wasn't real. So I think she's going to be, in many ways, easier to beat. To have a candidate, you know, we spent probably $100 million on beating him. Then we had a very good debate, and we beat him. And they said, well, instead of letting it go, who knows what happens, right? It's the world of politics. They say, we want him out. Joe, you're getting out now, Joe. Well, I don't want to get out. I have 14. You're getting out now, Joe. We can do it the nice way, or we can do it the hard way.
And while the substance of one of his speeches was supposed to be on the economy, an economy that is currently booming, and may I add that their favorite crutch of inflation is hitting its lowest level since spring of 2021.
When I left office, I handed Kamala and crooked Joe Biden a surging economy with no inflation. The 30-year mortgage rate was 2.4%. Gasoline had reached $1.87 a gallon, and for periods of time was even lower than that.
It's not actually the best day, though, for him to be doing this because the inflation report was a good one. So we're under 3% for the first time since March 2021. It's 15 months that we've seen wage growth go over the inflation rate, which is what everyone wants to see. There was a report out that our U.S. Crude oil production is now 13.4 million barrels a day. So we're outpacing 35% ahead of Russia, 38% ahead of Saudi Arabia. And what we're seeing in the surveys about this, like in Michigan, for instance, there was a FT and the Ross School of Business did a poll together of voters there, and they actually rated Kamala Harris as more trustworthy on the economy than Donald Trump. It was just 42 to 41, but she was trailing double digits, sometimes over 20 points behind him. So the American public is seeing a change here. They are seeing inflation cool. It's not done. 100% it's not done. But it is moving in the right direction, and that's why you're seeing such a surge for Kamala.
But instead, he spent the majority of his economy speech, complaining about Kamala Harris being on the cover of Time magazine while reprimanding her for laughing.
Nearly 4 years, Kamala has crackled as the American economy has burned. What happened to her laugh? I haven't heard that laugh in about a week. That's why they keep her off the stage. That's why she's disappeared. That's the laugh of a crazy person, I will tell you, if you haven't known it. It's a crazy. She's crazy. They told her, don't laugh, don't laugh. No, it's her. No, her laugh is career-threatening. They said, don't laugh. She hasn't laughed. She doesn't laugh anymore. It's smart, but someday it's going to come out. That's the laugh of a person with some big problems.
But at one point, he pivoted to the border, right? And as we know, whenever Trump discusses immigration, it's usually followed by unsubstantiated fear-mongering. But during this part of the rant, MSNBC's Steve Ratner was on hand to dive into the facts of the matter. And unsurprisingly, Trump is lying through his teeth, the teeth that he forgot to put back in during his Elon interview.
I want a closed-up Department of Education. So stupid. Stupid face. They all said I was wrong when I said that migrant crime will reach epidemic proportions. And now it's much worse than that. It's a lot worse than epidemic proportions. It's beyond control. We have a new category of crime. It's called migrant crime. And I think it's going to end up being the worst category of all.
All right, Steve, what does the data show?
Well, it was supposed to be an economic speech, but he can't help himself, and he has to get off into things like migrants and immigration and the border and crime and all that kind of stuff. But once again, the facts are not quite what he said. First, let's just talk about crime in general. He likes to think the country's in the middle of some crime wave. That is actually not true. Violent crime per 100,000 people has dropped 26% under Joe Biden, from an average of 398 per 100,000 people down to 294. What is even more amazing is that it, in fact, ended Trump's administration slightly higher than when it began. Or certainly, at best, most favorably, you can't see any improvement under Trump's administration. All the improvement has been under the Biden administration. Now, there's the fallacy of migrant crime. If you read the New York Post, you'd think, of course, all crime was committed by migrants. But in fact, and we've talked about this, I think, before, but it's really quite dramatic. If you break crime down between native-born Americans, documented immigrants, and undocumented immigrants, you can see that native-born American crime rate is actually higher than it is for documented immigrants and way higher than it is for undocumented immigrants. That's true whether you look at violent crime, whether you look at property crime, when you look at drug violations. The fact is immigrants actually commit fewer crimes than Americans. And for the undocumented immigrants, it's not totally surprising. They don't want to get sent back to wherever they came from, so they tend to behave themselves better than a lot of Americans and a lot of documented immigrants. So this is a complete fiction that Donald Trump has created.
But what does all this tell you, right? That a man who many Americans believe at the very least is a successful businessman can't even give a speech on the economy without coming across wildly unhinged and resorting to personal attacks and blatant lies. Why? Because it's all he has. And unfortunately, he's often given free rein to spew this nonsense and disinformation without reprieve. As MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell discussed in a powerful monologue last week, we must learn from 2016.
And absolutely no comment from the reporters who were allowed to throw questions at him today about how could you possibly flip-flop like that? Well, it was 2016 all over again today. Donald Trump spoke at his home in Florida for over an hour, and all of the cable news networks, including this one, carried it live, just like they all did repeatedly in 2016. It would be hard to find a sentence in what Donald Trump said today that did not include at least one lie. Some of the networks tried to play catch-up with fact-checking after Donald Trump finished speaking, but that, of course, is way too late and utterly useless. No network even attempted to fact-check every lie Donald Trump told. Every network has the capacity, especially with these wide screens we now have at home, to run a live scroll at the side of the screen, fact-checking many of Donald Trump's lies. Not all of them, that would be impossible, but many of them, as he speaks.
And listen, I'm never under the impression that cutting the cord is the way either. We need to show how unhinged he is. Democracy would literally die in darkness, I believe, if we stop covering him. But it doesn't mean that we allow all these claims to go unchecked. I mean, does technology, right, have a ticker rolling on the side or on the bottom throughout every one of his rallies? It points out each and every lie as they emerge. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's not an easy job at the rate that he lies, but it's an important one.
I'm glad you got started on this because there is a lot to unpack in terms of falsehoods. Let's start with the economy, a big thing for many issues out there. He said we could literally be in the throes of a depression, not a recession. He said close to a 1920s depression. 1920s, the depression was 25% unemployment. We're at 4.3% now. Not even close, not even the same ballgame. He also mentioned, weirdly enough, people can't buy bacon. I checked on bacon sales. They seem to be doing just fine. On the border, as Brianna noted earlier, he grossly overinflates the number of people coming over the border there. He also repeated a claim that he's made many times before that he really must like, even as the numbers fall here, saying this notion that people are coming out of mental institutions and prisons, as he said, all over the world. They're emptying into the United States. He said this many times, never offered any proof for it. About Kamala Harris, he says she's the most unpopular / worst vice president in history, couldn't pass her bar exam. Scholars surveyed by the LA Times ranked VPs from 1933 on. They put Harris at 11 out of 18. Not great, but certainly not the worst. And she did pass her bar exam, even though she had to do it more than once. She said President Biden had the presidency taken away from him. Not true. That is false. President Biden agreed to leave the presidency. He wasn't happy about it. Nobody would be, but he agreed to leave, and he backs Harris in her campaign. He said everybody wanted Roe v. Wade overturned. The country overwhelmingly wanted this and returned to the states. Not true. Even now, more than 2 years afterward, a Pew study said that 63% of people still think abortion nationwide should largely be legal, not left up to the states. And one more thing, he talked for quite some time there about how he protected Hillary Clinton and always wanted to keep her safe, but at least more than a half dozen times in recent years, he has said publicly she should go to jail, and a whole lot of other Democrats as well.
But as Steve Ratner did here, this is also vitally important and a step in the right direction.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.